Welcome to Rockstar Doctor Life. I'm Melissa Longo, and each episode, my guests and I will bring you fresh, fun ways to rock your life as a health professional and create a business that aligns with who you are and the life you want to live. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Rockstar Doctor Life. Joining me for, I have no doubt, it's going to be a dynamic, interesting conversation about life as a doc and a parent and an awesome human being is Dr. Stanton Hom. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
I'd love it if you could just start by sharing with listeners, who is Dr. Stanton? What are you up to? Give me a snapshot of your life right now.
Right now. So, I would say that in the last year, so much has changed, right? In the last year, like the whole world is basically under lockdown, and I have my own podcast. I'm a doc in San Diego, California, with a prenatal pediatric focus, and so we're very versed in things like informed consent and things like that. And so this last year is kind of wild, like thinking through how I got to where I am now. I became a doc because I had my own kind of chronic challenges heal when I was just getting out of the military. And so I had PTSD, I had chronic gut issues, chronic pain, chronic stress, and I didn't know it. I could do anything I wanted to. I could run half marathon anytime I wanted to. I was ridiculously fit. And my brother, who's a chiropractor, helped me reverse all of that by teaching me how to live and teaching me how my nervous system heals my body. And so all this last year has been so wild, just having so much craziness. So however you describe it, whether it's lockdown, whether it's oppression, whether it's tyranny, depending on what end of the spectrum you're on, I find myself where I am today because I served. And honestly, I just literally wrote a post, I think yesterday, and I just said, oh, no, I'm about to post it today. And it's just like, man, I didn't realize that myself as a veteran who served overseas, who has had men in his unit die, I didn't realize that I took freedom for granted. I had no idea. I had no idea whether it was free speech or it was freedom to assembly, all the First Amendment stuff here in the States. And I sit back thinking and realizing that where I am today in my practice is not just standing up for the kids in my practice and birth in my practice, but realizing that as a whole society today, that freedom is something that we have already. I will take it personally on my end, have taken for granted. And it's something that we're drawing the line on very strongly in our practice, that we're standing up for people for their own personal freedoms at this stage.
Mm-hmm. I think it's fascinating that you are a veteran.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear, you are officially the first veteran on the show. What was your journey? I mean, I'm sure that from other, people that I know, it's quite a foundational shift in who you are, and it shapes a lot of your life. And I'd love to know your story, how you got involved, and then how you transitioned from that. I know you said that it was your brother that got you thinking about healthy living, but how did you make that transition then as a chiropractor?
When I was younger, I didn't realize this because we grew up very Asian Americanized, like very Americanized here in the States. And so and then at the same time sheltered. And so my grandfather, I didn't know this at the time, but I started to look at old pictures, and they came over in the 1940s, my dad's side of the family, from China, fleeing basically what was happening, their own civil war in China. And Mao ended up being in power, and communist China, basically reigned supreme out there. And so he brought 5 men from his family over to the States and just searching for opportunity, and so he ended up serving in World War II in support of Allied forces. And I really didn't know anything about it growing up. Like, we were so sheltered from everything that we were experiencing. And then once I was going to college, I don't know how, but I'm a mama's boy. And so my mom still holds a lot of weight in my life. And I love that. And I appreciate that. And it's so wild who you attract as partners, like my wife and my mom. Like, I have a picture of them vacuuming on our stair. Like, there's like 7 stairs out there. Both have their own vacuum, and so like my life is extremely clean and organized because of the women in my life. But the whole point of this is he served in World War II. And when it came for me to go to college, there was an opportunity for me to go to West Point, the United States Military Academy. And honestly, my mom jumped on it. I didn't know what I was getting into. I would say, if you asked me then, when I was 17, all the way till my junior year, I would have blamed my mom for all the hell that I was going through, and I was doing it for her. But at the core of all of it was recognizing that my grandfather would always just say, like, the life we have today is because of this country. And the life that we have today, the fact that I have parents that met in the States, and the fact that we have the opportunities that we have today, are all because of, essentially, and this is a book that I read later, that there's actually a book on Chinese Americans from Los Angeles, Southern California, that served in World War II, being a force in equality for Asian Americans in the States. There used to be a Chinese Exclusionary Act that was very discriminatory towards Chinese people, but because of their service in World War II, led to a lot of the reversals of that. And so the long and short of it is, I got into it because my mom told me to. I continued on it because I knew that I didn't have a better option as far as who I was as a 17 to 19-year-old kid who probably would have taken like 7 or 8 years in college, and at the same time was getting trained to be, basically the top leadership institution in the States, if not the world. And so for me, that led to the Army, did 5 years of service, most of it at Fort Hood, Texas, and then spent one of those years deployed in Iraq, in a small city 25 kilometers south of Tikrit. And it was actually, and this is not something that I've shared that often, was actually the city that Saddam Hussein was caught in Iraq. And so kind of an interesting path.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, at this stage, that's my mantra. My mantra is, how do I honor my ancestors, and how do I honor freedom in a way that, just paves the path forward for the world that my daughter inherits from me.
Mm-hmm. You likely have a deep appreciation.
It's at this stage, I didn't realize it, but in the last year, it's woken up in me something that it actually breaks my heart, on some angles, just looking at how willingly we have been able to be just completely locked into our homes. Some people can't even leave homes without masks. Some people can't practice. Some people can't, who knows what area of the world is at what state of things, because it seems to change so politically and so interestingly. And when it came to free speech and watching all the censorship this year, that's where I kind of drew the line. And I just told my friends here in San Diego, because, most of them are not necessarily independent or middle. Most of them lean more liberal, which I absolutely love and adore about them. But I drew the line at the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment for, at least how our family was going to navigate. And it woke up a pretty big, kind of sleeping lion in me. So anyways.
Yeah. So, but it sounds to me like in that kind of clarity that you found,
Yeah.
that's also strengthened your values, right? And what you're willing to fight for, what you're willing to stand up for.
Yeah. And honestly, it's no different than chiropractic to me, right? Chiropractic is an unleashing of a healing potential in life that we all have just by being alive today. And what that affords us is the freedom to navigate choices and lifestyle and things like that. But at the same time, some people, and you're probably the same, find you and they're on 5-6 medications and they don't want to be on any of them, but they feel like they have to be on them, and they feel like they don't really have any other options. And then we tend to be the first person that tells them, you have this ridiculously healing potential inside of you. And to them, once they recognize that process and experience it and feel it, it's a level of freedom, right? It's a level of freedom that for me, it's congruent. That's how I navigate practice. That's how I navigate life at this stage. So, yeah.
And how many years have you been in chiropractic practice now?
11 years now.
11 years. And
Yeah.
was your focus exclusively always on pediatrics?
It
or
was,
did you evolve with time?
Yeah. No, I've always been in family practices. I did maybe a year and a half of associate work, and honestly, all those practices were whole family practices. And then once I got into my own practice, I really started to focus on pregnancy, pediatric, and so I would say at this stage, 40 to 60% on a given month is that demographic. So
Mhm. And what keeps you, I know you've talked about, really wanting to stand up for people's freedom and the
Yeah.
ability to choose really great healthcare. But what keeps you inspired right now in your practice?
I would say in the practice, what keeps me the most inspired is recognizing that since who knows, right? Like we chose, like we were always called essential in the States. So we never had to close, but there was this weird kind of divide, obviously, which happens in chiropractic and basically the world,
Mhm.
where actually my biggest fear at the beginning was whether or not a chiropractor was going to report me versus, the public was going to report me.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what we realized is I asked myself a question and I said, I believe essential and non-essential to be an inside job. I don't think the government is allowed to tell me if I'm essential or not essential to my own family, to my own community. And
Mhm.
I just had to ask my staff, and a lot of them were a little bit, scared and uncertain about what life was going to be like. And I just said, I'm asking myself this question, and I need you to ask yourself this question. And then, however you answer it, I love you no matter what and support you however you do. And I asked myself the question, is my care and the work that we do and my purpose in life more essential now in times of crises, in times of chaos and uncertainty? Is it more essential or less essential? And at the end of the day, I couldn't put my head on my pillow and put myself to sleep in any sort of peace by saying not. And so we, as a staff and a team, have basically worked from that premise, and we grew our practice bigger than it's ever been, more inspired than it's ever been, more committed patients and more committed community members than it's ever been, and more vocal than it's ever been. And we've attracted a small amount of dissent, and we've attracted a whole lot of people looking for the work that we do. And
Mhm.
so I think it's more of like, instead of all the stuff on the outside, it's been more of an inside job, really thinking in my own heart, how essential am I at this stage?
Mhm.
I look at the world, and for our state, California, the arguably, maybe us in New York, the two most locked down states, and the mindset shift, right? That somebody outside of you can tell you that your job, that your purpose, that your passion, that your service to the world is not essential. That mindset, like, for the people that just trust, right? Like, because I was trained, follow orders, follow,
Mhm.
like, literally follow, like, anything that anybody tells you, especially people in the government. And at this stage, like, it, I couldn't put my head down to sleep unless I answer that question more powerfully for myself.
Mhm. So if someone is struggling today and they're listening to this, and who knows by the time, we release this show where the things will be in the
There are things to
world
be,
at
right?
that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
But basically what I'm hearing is that, you felt challenged in this
Yeah.
situation, like probably other situations in your life.
Yeah.
And your solution was to go within and to look inside yourself, figure out what mattered to you, and come to a decision that you could put your head down at night and feel good and confident about your decisions and how you're living your life. So if someone is struggling with something today, whatever it might be, their purpose, their rules being enforced upon them, anything really, I mean, would that be your advice, like go within, or do you have other resources, tools, things that have helped you if you've ever had these other internal sort of crisis, so to speak?
Yeah. You know, I would say if there's one tool that I have, and this actually comes through one of our shared mentors, Dr. Ed Osborne, who I believe got it from the Warrior Group. But there's a tool called the Stack. And the Stack is a series of questions. And if any of the listeners want to be guided through this process, it's not something I sell, it's not a list or a program. It's just a series of questions that take triggers
Mhm.
and things that happen in your life that elicit stories and feelings and thoughts and actions that, if not resolved, will lead to the same stuff we've always done. The same trigger leads to the same emotional, whatever, negativity or limiting belief. And having this series of questions helps navigate people through to a place where their stories actually don't get them what they truly want on the inside. And this has been a daily practice to literally transform these triggers into power and really find ways to recognize that, as hard and as crappy and whatever it is that happens out there, that all of that is, from my viewpoint, it is a message of divinity saying, this is for you. This is the challenge. This is what you're supposed to kind of unleash inside of you. If you choose to see it for what it is and transform it into something that actually moves you forward in a direction that you're inspired by it. For me, it's a daily practice. It's part of my morning routine. It's something I do before I send messages of love to people in my life. And when I do those types of things, and there's so many forms, right? I believe Warrior got it from, who's the author?
Byron Katie's work.
Yes, Byron Katie's work,
Yeah,
right? Loving What Is, right? The book where she calls it the work. And Dr. John DeMartini has the DeMartini method, where he basically, has this whole process. I think it's a series of 14 questions, which is a simple, like the simplest version, where basically you take any challenge that's in your life or anything that takes you either too high or too low, and bring yourself back into your heart so that you can actually, but it's a process. Like, it's something that you have to work at. It's not like go within and just sit there and think about it. Although meditation and prayer is absolutely essential in these times. It is a cognitive process that's how my mind works, that helps me come to the end and actually transform all of the challenges that I find in my life into something that I can use.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks for sharing that. That's an amazing resource. Byron Katie, I've read her book. You're absolutely right. If we don't look at what the stories we're telling ourselves are, and either have someone outside ourselves, so whether that's a professional, a coach, a mentor, a therapist, a partner, or doing your own self-work, we spin these stories that are not even true, and they can really affect your day-to-day life and in a negative way. So it's
and
a powerful
the
shift.
mantra that people, at least I used to tell myself, is just like, God, this always happens to me. This always happens to me. It's always the same thing. And it's like, if it is, then it's probably not the thing. It's probably me, right? And if it's me, then I got to do something about it, right? I think it's
the common denominator.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I've been back in production the last few weeks here, and I will say that, and viewers, where this is January of 2021, a lot of the conversation has definitely come to, where did we grow in 2020, right? And it makes me think of what you were just saying, like having to go within and look at, okay, what were the crises that came up? Were your docs whose businesses were closed? My business was closed for 2 months. Identity crisis, family dynamics changing, kids schooling changing, financial law, like a lot of difficult things happen to people. And the people that seem to be getting through with a little bit more ease are the ones who've been able to do what you've said and look at it with some kind of opportunity for self-discovery, growth, moving forward in a new direction. I said to one of my friends this morning, we can't change what's happening right now. We just have to keep walking through it. You can't go around this, right? We can't. We have to keep going through it and trying to find our way, right? So
there are people in my community who have not necessarily my group of friends, but my patients will tell me about friends in their world. And this is like a month ago, so maybe 290 days, like they actually haven't left their homes in 290 days. And in my view, my hope and my prayer is that they're doing something with that. I hope, right? It's wild to think that all of this can lock down and we can just come out of it the same or worse, right? It's like you have to do the work to find a way to come out of it because of all of it that's going on. Come out of it even more powerful than you went in, right?
That's my hope too. I keep thinking there has to be, what if we all emerge and I've already seen shifts, with clients and how they've structured their life and, people in my practice, but also business coaching clients, taking a step back and realizing what's really important, as you were talking about earlier, really getting solid on their values and where they draw a line in the sand and what they will accept in their life and what they will not. And I think those are positive things. So I hold that energy too, as much as I can.
Totally.
Because I think we need to for ourselves, but for other people in our communities. And, you're definitely someone rather that's been a light for other people. I love seeing, your podcast and things that you've shared on social media. And I love it when I see other people who I know sharing your messages. So tell me how that expansion started. I mean, you've been in private practice now, already busy practice, busy dad, family life. And then you decided to launch a podcast and expand your message. Where'd that come from?
That came from need, right? It's kind of wild how sometimes that emphasis is like I got into college because my mom told me, right? But then this was like, I don't know if we're going to have the brick and mortar. I don't know where this is all going to go. I didn't know if it's a real virus and everybody's going to be decimated, and who knows, right? The other side was maybe it's just levels of oppression that are going to lock down and we won't be able to have a practice. And so we sat back, my wife and I, and we were just like, we got to do something that is, one, able to get kind of our kind of purpose and vision into the world, continue that. And at the same time, who knows, maybe we're going to have to, like, that will be our future business. Who knows? Like, I had no idea. Right. And so let's see, our first episode was July, the Future Generations podcast. Our practice down here in San Diego is called Future Generations Clinic of Chiropractic. And so basically my vision was just like, how do I take the 11 years of conversations that I've had, which in my view, which some of my mentors just said, if you're going to start a podcast, you need content that's going to go viral. Like every conversation has to. And I was just like, every practice member from every demographic, but especially moms and especially kids, like all of those are things that if people actually heard and knew and acted upon, their life would change forever. Like when you hear about kids that like heal from chronic problems because they've been told that that's just normal or they're going to grow out of it. And in reality, there's neither of that that's happening in conventional medicine. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks and months with amazing chiropractic care and lifestyle changes, they actually realize how their body can actually transform and heal. That's not just miraculous for that kiddo. It's miraculous for the family, and especially mom. And then it's a miraculous for everybody who's a part of that. Right. And so for us, we realized that we could take all of those conversations, put them into the world, and then go from there. That was the first step. And then that led to just recognizing that I had been for, let's see, by the time December rolled around, I guess for 9 months at that stage, 8 months, it's like, who's going to do it? Like, who's going to have an event? Who's going to do something that represents something for freedom in California, because we feel this, and who knows if anybody's going to show up, because everybody seems to just be going along with everything. And so we just sat back and we had a really amazing conversation with one of my favorite influencers in the whole health freedom movement, Melissa Floyd. I don't know if you're familiar with her. And we just sat back, we're like, let's do it. We were going to collaborate with her. And she was like, we're going to do the Dr. Bob, like she does a podcast with Dr. Bob Sears called The Vaccine Conversation. They're going on a podcast tour. She was like, do you think San Diego would be a good place? So like, hey, we were already thinking about doing an event anyways, let's collaborate. They ended up not doing their tour, but she still spoke with us. We hosted an event called the Heart of Freedom. And we had myself, Del Bigtree, Melissa Floyd. We had Nurse Erin Olszewski. I don't know if you know who she is, but she was the undercover nurse that was at a hospital in Brooklyn, Elmhurst, that was undercover, kind of highlighting all the disparities that were happening in the epicenter of COVID in the States, at least. We had Dr. Tommy John. We had another one of my buddies who happens to be a West Point grad, Alex Zach, huge Instagram following. And we didn't tell anybody where it was. Because we didn't have a venue until the Friday before. And all of a sudden we lock in the venue, we tell people, and we start selling tickets, and we had 1,000 people there. We had 1,000 people, and it was the week that Governor Newsom chose to put a 10 o'clock curfew on the state of California for no reason whatsoever. And people were like, are we going to have this? Like, is this event going to happen? And that was my opening speech. I said, many of you thought that perhaps we shouldn't have this event, or we weren't going to have this event because of the 10 o'clock curfew. And I'm here to tell you that this is exactly why we're here, and this is exactly why we're having it. And so we sold 809 tickets, but had over 1,000 people there. So we don't know who necessarily snuck in. But what it was for us was a flag in the sand that we planted for freedom in the state that's one of the most oppressed, surrounded by so many people that are just following the crowd. And we had 1,000 people register and show up, and just completely inspired and ready to actually take this whole thing on, and it's not, in our world, we've been taught, at least in California, that being open, that choosing your family's livelihood and to take care of people in your world and your business is selfish. We've been programmed to believe that here in California, and especially in San Diego. And honestly, at this stage, I completely stand in opposition to that viewpoint. And so at this stage, that's what we're at. We have a practice that's grown, we have a podcast that's growing, and we have now like a following that wants to meet in person, not necessarily listening to all the rules. And honestly, we didn't know. We didn't have any of this like a year ago, right? Turn back the clock exactly a year. We didn't have any of it at that stage. And we had a really good practice, and we had a really good following in the practice, but we didn't have anything else beyond that. And at this stage, we're just like, how else can we serve? How else can we serve the community and just light people up with that inspiration that's inside of them? Because at this stage, that's what I'm here for. I'm not here to just go against tyranny and go against the government. I'm here for the people in their hearts and actually realize that they matter, that they're essential, that their perspectives and their passion and their livelihood to support their families and their ability to serve our community is more essential now than ever, right?
So there must have been, I mean, what I'm hearing from you over and over again here is, leading from your heart, but also there's definitely an element of boldness, of confidence, of a little bit of fearlessness, knowing that, I mean, gosh, I want to know, I mean, you must have had detractors. Did you have any fear about organizing a live event and having anything happen to your practice? There's a fear around all this that I think is holding a lot of docs back, or just humans back, everyone, from standing up for themselves. And so for anyone listening to this today, how can they channel that? How can they find that confidence, that courage that you seem to have?
So when I started to speak out on social media, honestly, I did it maybe right before the event. Right before the event. So it's people look at my stuff and they're like, oh, thank you for speaking out. I'm like, it's been like a month. Like it's been like 8 weeks, maybe, And I used to post really awesome and cute pictures of my kid at the beach without a mask, just doing the thing, crawling around in the water and talking about the microbiome and talking about how self-healing and representing chiropractic that way. And then one of the guys from the event, my buddy, who is he's a West Point grad. So imagine graduating in 2000. So I graduated 20 years ago and not having not one person from West Point in 20 years ever have the same values as me. And along this whole journey in this last year, I meet one, and he's a graduate from class 2016. And he, in my mind, and my mantra is like, holy cow, this is the kid. Cause he's like, I always thought like, what if I'd met the person that knew what I know now, but reversing back 20 years, like this is him, right? And he said to me, he was like, dude, like, you know more stuff than I ever will. Like you have 11 years of clinical practice. Why aren't you saying anything? And I was like, dude, like, I don't want to get shut down. I don't want the board to come after me. I don't want this or that. And he goes, he just starts laughing. He's like, you just had Tommy John, on your podcast. You just had Tommy John at the event. He has, 90,000 followers on Instagram. He's shadow banned, censored. He's the most outspoken person in chiropractic potentially at this stage. And he still practices in the state of California, in the most, in one of the biggest areas that you're going to get turned in at some point. And he's like, I think you have a guidepost that if I haven't, right, I have like, I don't know, like, I don't track followers, but if I have been speaking out for 8 weeks, but over the whole year, and we have had some detractors, but in the whole year, how many patients have come in and be like, I don't like your mask policy, I'm out? One. And my model now, just the way that we do it, we run our practice as an informed consent practice. So I don't wear a mask unless a patient tells me they absolutely need me to. And so I will. But I walk into the new patient room. I don't know how I figured this out, but I walked in, I just said, do you need me to wear this? And I started to see over the last year, 80% of the people take their mask off and say, I don't have to wear mine. Like, we run an informed consent practice. We have a lot of patients, kids who have special needs. We have a lot of adult patients who have a history of trauma, and we have pregnant patients, which in my 11 years of clinical practice, you should never deprive a pregnant woman of oxygen. And so these are people that are going to be maskless here. If that's not okay with you, then maybe we'll find you a different practice. They all take their mask off. And if they don't, they take it off by visit 3. And that showed me, without forcing anything onto people, what people knew intuitively they felt they wanted and where they felt safe. And we've created a community that is just respectful. We have a naturopath in the practice that is very mask vigilant, and she has her own profession. She has her own way of doing things. She approached me early on a little bit upset with the way that I did things. And I just said, we just have to agree to disagree. And if you want to practice here, you're going to have to be okay with the way that we do things. But I have one rule: no shaming, no coercion. If anybody that in my practice does anything to your patients, like, you tell me, but I promise you, our culture will never allow for that. And at the same time, we've had no incidents since then. And so on a small level, there are ways to implement that, because there are patients who I've found were just dying to just be free of that type of, whatever, that type of intervention, that not been safety test, blah, blah, blah. Like, we can go down that whole route. But there's others who are actually okay, because then I started to wear masks for patients that wear masks, right? And then I just asked one day, I was like, hey, do you need me to wear this? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to wear it just because you're going to wear it. And so I was like, there's all these people in the world that navigate this so differently, that it wasn't this polarized black or white for me. It was just a test over the last year. And all I really wanted was the freedom to make choices for myself in my own practice. And at this stage, I don't have any patients that say, you have to wear a mask for me. And I was like, okay, that makes sense to me, because if you feel protected, or you feel like you need to follow rules, go for it. But when it came to social media, it was more about just like, and I know different provinces, different locations have different rules on what you can actually say. California, United States, we have the ability to speak out more. But it became very clear to me that people who I respected wanted to learn from me. And when I realized that there was a guidepost of people who have been doing it for a lot longer, that had not been attacked, that had not been censored, that had not been shut down, it gave me the freedom to just be like, okay, like, if he's way out there for like more than a year and he hasn't had anybody come after him, and at the same time, he's found a way to grow a community online and in person that is equally aligned with him, because they're just dying for this level of leadership, then I'm just going to go, right? I'm going to go, because if I look at my kid in the eye and I feel like I'm not standing up for her, then it breaks my heart. Like, it literally, at the core of my being, it breaks my heart. And I know I've heard many of you docs, like, some of you message me, some of you post other things, like to docs like me, saying like, that's something that eats some of the people inside, is realizing that this is the world we're maybe, not like silently just subscribing to. And you have to realize that if you believe in what we do, if you believe in interference to the system, if you believe in subluxation and the ability to actually have congruency, or the alignment that we have to have in our lives, I would say that a quote that I got from DeMartini is that basically, I'd rather have the whole world against me than my own soul at this stage. And at this stage, I could not do it another day. And when people I respected and looked up to were looking at me and hearing and learning from me, I realized that I had so much more to give than I was actually allowing myself to do.
Well, and what I, keep hearing from you is your heart of service, right? You're coming from a place of, serving and looking out for other people and helping other people. And the intention around that, for me, it has to create a bubble of protection on some level. If it was different, if you were, full of greed and, self-serving, like, the energy around it is very different. You're just trying to protect people's health and freedom and their ability to choose healthcare that helps them optimize their function. Which, ironically, in a time when the health is being so challenged, right, why not allow people to do things that support their health?
Right. Right. Like, gym owners are being arrested in California, in the United States. I don't know if this is happening globally, but it's like, why the hell are gyms closed? If this
Yeah.
is clearly a comorbidity thing, which we know everything is about health status in your body, then why is that incongruency there? And why not just say something about it? You know, if you don't want to fight the power, why not just start bringing those conversations, those inconsistencies that everybody sees, but no one really knows how to kind of collate them and organize them in their own mind? Because what I'll tell you is that in doing that, it's like you said, it is purely from heart for me. It's not from like, I am not the fight the power type person. I'm a very compliant, very amiable. That's just my nature. That's who I am. But what I know is that at this stage, people see it. Most of us see the inconsistencies, even in our own world. There are people that will not see their families, but they'll go to the store, right? No, I'm not going to see my grandchild because of whatever reason, but I can go to Target and I can go to Walmart and I can go to all these places, and they don't see that inconsistency, right? But when faced with that, because that happened in our own family, I said, so traveling for the holidays to see your granddaughter, your youngest granddaughter, versus getting sick, like you're choosing not to get sick. And people don't recognize that when you're like, you can come at them and say, you're a terrible grandparent, you're terrible this, you don't believe in, blah, blah, blah. Or you can just say, this is what you're choosing right now. And at the end of the day, we've gotten people to do things that they maybe not would have wanted to initially, just by asking them questions and highlighting some of those inconsistencies in a logical, rational, and loving way. Because
In a kind about it. Yeah.
Because when patients, if you don't have these conversations with your patients already, patients are having grandparents and great grandparents die in isolation right now. Patients are having babies and they have to wear a mask and they have to be tested before they're reunited with baby, before mom can actually hold baby. Like that, to me, it's just it is a crime against life. It's a crime against humanity. And if we don't call it out in some ways, like, then it continues, or patients will just kind of do what they are told. And in our world, we've had more home births and we have more homeschoolers in the last year. Do I believe that to be a success? I believe it to be a vote for our patients to choose something they never would have chosen before, because we asked the question. And we just said, this is what you want, but this path isn't going to get you there. And so is there a way that we can support you through a potentially new process? But it's wild. We even have midwives that are canceling care in California. They're canceling care. Some visits are non-essential. They're super, super scared, which I understand the fear. But at the same time, I'm hoping that I can continue to ask them those questions. That I don't think there's a more essential healthcare provider in the world than anybody that's navigating birth, right?
No, and what I keep thinking now is, be the change you want to see in the world. Right?
Absolutely.
Like, it's just like one person at a time, one person in your practice, one stranger out, in your community, on social media, wherever it is. Like, how can we continue to just be the change you want to see? Whether, whenever you're finding yourself listening to this, watching this, viewers, listeners, I know this will hit you somewhere, right? Because we're always getting, right now there's a crisis happening. However, there's personal crisis that happens in docs' lives all the time that makes it difficult to stand up. People get complaints from their boards, from their states. They go through personal crisis, all kinds of things. And at the end of the day, we have to rely on ourselves and the people around us to help lift us up. So thank you today for sharing so much.
I appreciate the opportunity, Dr. Melissa. I really do.
Everyone, if you want to connect with Dr. Stanton, I absolutely suggest that you do. Be sure to check out the show notes. You'll have his links to how to reach him, but also to check out his podcast and tune in and listen and learn and stay connected to be the light for other people. Thanks again for your time today.
Of course, I'm honored. I really am.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Find out more about today's guests and everything else that we talked about in the show notes. You can also find all this content and so much more, including videos, blog posts, and how you can work with me on the Rockstar Doctor Life website. If you haven't yet reviewed the show, we'd love it if you headed on over to iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review about what your thoughts are about future episodes for the show and what you like best. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram at Melissa Longo DC, and of course on Facebook. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.